So welcome everyone. We're going to dive right in. I am Mark Gilfix. This is Michael Gilfix. For those of you who know us, hello. It's good to connect with you. For those of you who don't know us, we're going to give you a little more background on who we are and where we're coming from in a moment. But I think the focus of today is on long-term care, multi-generational planning for long-term care. So this is part of our Law at Home series that we are doing with Avenidas. We have been longtime partners with the Avenidas Center. We want to thank Tracy and the rest of the amazing team there for having us. And again, the focus today is multi-generational planning for long-term care. How can you get great long-term care, and how can you preserve your assets? Or maybe how can your parents get great long-term care and preserve assets? Anyone in your family who faces this, this is a critical topic. What's on your mind these days as we dive into this? Are you worried about your finances? Are you worried about your health? Are you worried about the cost and quality of long-term care? Do you just feel overwhelmed by what is going on in the world? I mean, these are obviously unprecedented, crazy times. We don't need to remind you that we're going through a pandemic, something that most of us have not had to face during our lifetimes. Now, those of you who are of the greatest generation, you know, you've been through World War II and you've been through the Vietnam War, that we've been through crises before. But for people in my generations, this is kind of like the first crisis we faced really as a society. And we're all trying to make sense of it. But the reality is that long-term care is an issue that isn't going away. If anything, the COVID crisis makes it even more timely and more pressing. And the bottom line is we are here to help. We are here to help you break down these issues. We're trying to break them down in plain English. I want to explain to you some of the options that are available and how you can sort through the focus today, again, long-term care issues. As we dive in, picture in your mind's eye, I kind of jumped ahead, but picture in your mind's eye what you think of when you hear the word retirement. Probably most of us have that image that we often see in financial services ads of sailing through the Mediterranean or the Pacific Ocean on our wonderful sailboat as we drift off into the sunset and enjoy our daily glasses of champagne and toast to how wonderful the world is. That's a wonderful thing. Sadly, the reality is that this isn't what most people end up facing. And just to reset our minds and how we look at long-term care, I want to go through some areas in our lives and risks that we all take, that we take precautions for. I want to compare that to what we think about when it comes to long-term care. So, house fire. If you own a house, how many people here own a home? Chances are you have fire insurance. In fact, you probably have to have fire insurance as part of your homeowner's insurance. But the odds that you'll ever actually have a fire that causes catastrophic damage, about 3 in 1,000, 0.3%. And yet, it's really kind of required that we have this insurance, and most of us have homeowners insurance to cover for these types of catastrophic losses. But again, a 3 in 1,000 chance we're gonna ever need it. Driving, well, we all by law have to have car insurance, but I think even if we didn't, most of us would probably get car insurance and driver's insurance. What are the odds that our car could get totaled in an accident? 23 in 1,000, so about 2.3%. I'd like it to be lower, but still, that's not very good odds, or good odds that you will never have to face that. I hope you never do. But yet we all have insurance for this. We all plan for this. We all want to get the safest car possible. We take steps to prevent this and to deal with it. Long-term care. This is a category that most Americans don't think much about, and yet 700 in 1,000 of us will face long-term care. For Americans over 65, about 70% will need some form of long-term care. So this isn't just some remote risk. This isn't just some way out there type of risk. The reality is the vast majority of us will need some form of long-term care. And that's what this talk is about. And Mike and I are going to go through different ways for thinking about and preparing for paying the cost of home care. Certainly a very timely topic given all the issues in care homes with COVID, the cost of assisted living, and the cost of nursing home care if you ever need that. We hope you don't, but needless to say, many people eventually do need that. We want to show you ways to do that without losing everything. And some of the steps you can think about now from the legal, financial, and insurance side of things to be very well prepared.
Okay, so let's revisit this and put a little more meat on the bones. When we talk about long-term care, it's not just nursing home care at all. It's really kind of a spectrum of care. So when we're looking at the 75% need, that doesn't mean 70% of us will be in a nursing home. It means that we'll need some form of long-term care. We might get it at home, which is what most of us want. We might be in an assisted living facility. We might be in a nursing home, which is not what we want. And with what's going on with the pandemic, let's face it, that's less and less attractive every day. As unattractive as it already was, it's even less attractive. The cost, I mean, it's enormous. $100,000, $150,000 to be cared for at home. If you need an enormous level of care, very high level of care, it can be as much or more, much more, frankly, than the cost of a facility. And we'll revisit this topic as we go along about staying at home, which is what we want. And we have to be realistic about what the cost is and how we're going to plan for it. We have seen folks spend over $500,000. There's a couple we represented who were living at the V, the beautiful facility adjacent to the shopping center. Both of them needed care, supplemental care, on top of what they were paying to the V. They were spending over $500,000 a year for full-time supplemental care. So it's enormous. We all kind of know this, but it's important to drink it in and realize it could be our future, because we have to face, we deal in reality. That's what we so often say. So what we're going to do now is present a few mysteries, a few fact situations to really give this some context. So let's, Mark, let's go to the next one, please. Okay. So again, we want to present some kind of practical profiles. So first of all, let's look at a couple of different families, Lena and Helen, a tale of two families. Okay. Lena owned her home locally. And she used the equity in her home to pay for care. She wanted to stay at home. She did use home equity for that purpose. As a result, her family lost over $600,000, what they ultimately inherited. Okay. Helen, comparable value home, same community. She owned her home as well, and she also used the equity in her home to pay for home care. But for her, the entire value of the house was lost. They did not lose that $600,000. Okay, so how can that be? How can that possibly be? What's the mystery?
Yeah, the entire value of your home is protected. And let's talk about two long-term care insurance policies, George and Alan. So both George and Alan paid $3,200 a year in annual premiums for 18 years to pay for their long-term care insurance policies. Both of them were lucky. They were in that 30% category that didn't need any long-term care. When George passed away, his family got nothing. All the money he put into that policy was lost. Alan, on the other hand, same money put in, slightly different types of policies, and as a result, Alan's family ended up with $180,000 when Alan passed away after not needing long-term care. So both Alan and George paid in for 18 years thinking they were planning ahead intelligently. George passed away, didn't use the insurance policies, family got nothing back. Alan passed away, having not used the long-term care provisions, and yet his family got $180,000. What is the difference? What is the different thing that Alan did versus what George did?
Okay, we have one more mystery before we take a second and introduce ourselves a bit more and launch into a bit more some of the details. But it's so useful to see these real life stories. Okay, so this is Paul and Greg. This involves life insurance policies. The previous example involved long-term care insurance policies, right? Now we're talking about regular life insurance policies. Okay, so Paul had a policy with the death benefit of $500,000. It had about $60,000 in cash value. It was a whole life policy. Greg, slightly less value, $380,000 death benefit, $40,000 cash value, not insignificant, not huge. Many of us have policies like this. At some point, both of them stopped paying the premiums, okay? For Paul, his insurance policy was entirely lost, did him no good, nothing left for the family. For Greg, his policy paid for his health care. So how can this be? What the heck happened here? What's the mystery?
And as we dive in, we've spoken a little bit about the cost. Mike, do you want to go through the different categories?
Yeah,
of cost?
we did allude to this, but let's be a little bit more specific. And these are broad numbers, and yet they're they're indicative. Home care, you're hiring somebody to be there with you. Might be companion care. You might need a nurse. 2,000 to 10 grand a month, and we've seen much more than that, as you can appreciate. Okay. Then we have what's called our residential care and assisted living. We are in a different. You're not at home anymore. You're getting a lot of help. And the amount of help the more help you get, the more it costs. Again, 3,000, actually realistically 4,000 minimum, $10,000, $12,000 a month. It can easily be. You're not in a nursing home. You're in an independent apartment or building. Getting a lot of help. Skilled nursing care, $8,000 to $16,000 a month. And I'll tell you, the future is that it's going to be even more expensive.
That's right.
Without a doubt. So one of the first questions that usually comes up is how are you going to pay for it? And Mark, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so the first thought is, what about Medicare? Will Medicare pay my nursing home bills? Will it pay for home care? One of the most important points to drink in is that Medicare will not pay for the ongoing cost of long-term care. Here and there, it can help. But still, a majority of older Americans believe that Medicare is going to cover this. So if you have that illusion, it means you're not going to plan. So again, we keep saying it. We deal in reality. You got to know where you can get help, and maybe more importantly, where you can't get help. Okay.
And I mentioned this before, but if you have questions, you can submit them via the Q&A bar. We'll try to get to as many as we can at the end if we have time.
Yeah.
So just on that note.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Okay, we have one more mystery. Now this deals with Medi-Cal and asset protection. Okay, here we have Lois and William, two individuals, again, in our community here. Both of them had $100,000.
Different situations in this case. Lois had 100,000. William had a lot more.
No, absolutely, but they face similar circumstances. Okay, it's good to have those younger guys correcting you and keeping you on track. It's so hard for us. Okay, so so Lois had a $100,000 estate, faced a lot of needs, and she spent every penny she had before Medi-Cal stepped in and paid for her nursing home bills. William, $4 million estate, dramatically larger estate, and for him, Medi-Cal paid for his care. So again, how can that be? 100,000, had to spend everything, million, and Medi-Cal qualified for Medi-Cal, and Medi-Cal paid. So again, how can that possibly be? What's the mystery?
So we think that the biggest mystery, by the way, is the fact that most people don't get the answers that they need. That they'll get an answer from one person selling this type of product, or another person who's a financial advisor, and their lawyer will give them different advice. You get different partial answers from a lot of different people. And our goal, we are attorneys, our focus is estate planning, but we want to think holistically about how you can deal with this and the different ways all of these solutions can fit together. And our mission is to educate and empower you and your family to make sure that you have a vibrant future and that you hold on to all those assets you work so hard for. And that you at least understand these issues, because there absolutely is a cost to waiting, not planning ahead. A lot of people want to put their heads in the sand thinking, oh, well, we'll deal with it when we get there. Unfortunately, that puts you and your family in a really tough situation in many cases. So that's what we're here to explore. So for those of you who don't know us, I am Mark Gilfix, and this is Michael Gilfix, and I've known Michael for over 40 years now, because he is probably pretty clearly my father. I was born in Palo Alto, so my parents came out from different parts of the country. Mike is from a small town in northern Michigan, just off the coast, well, on Lake Huron. We check the weather there all the time. It's been freezing there literally up until this week. It's so cold. So he came out to California to go to Stanford University, transferred from University of Michigan, stayed at Stanford for law school, graduated in 1973. And I'll go back into more of his exploits. But when he graduated from Stanford, he wanted to change the world. This was an idealistic time. He had no interest in joining a big law firm or a big corporation to make as much money as he could. He wanted to help people. He was a social entrepreneur. He looked for a need. He didn't know which community to help or what to do. but he looked for a community in need and said, you know what, I'm going to find needs and I'm going to fill them. And he found two audiences, or two communities in particular: older Americans and Americans with disabilities. And he saw there was a need. There were not services available, free legal services adequately serving these populations or representing them. So he set out and he really created the field of elder law in the process, and also was one of the leaders in helping Americans with disabilities. And in 1973, he started America's first free legal aid program for seniors, SALA, Senior Adults Legal Assistance. It still exists today in California, in Santa Clara County. Not only did he start SALA, which was a Herculean effort of fundraising and education, he went around the country to help other people raise money to start other programs around America. So directly and indirectly, he's responsible for serving tens of thousands of older Americans with free legal services, and really helped shape the laws that protect older Americans today. He testified in front of Congress. Similarly, in 1976, started the Disability Law Center, one of the first free legal aid programs for Americans with disabilities. Ran nonprofits for over 10 years after graduating from law school, but when he had me and my first of my two sisters, realized that he eventually needed to earn some money in the Bay Area, and went into private practice, but held on to his values of really helping families. He and my mother started Gilfix and Associates back in 1983. That's the firm that we're with today. It's helped thousands of families in the Bay Area, really throughout the state of California. He's educated hundreds and hundreds of attorneys. He's appeared in the media, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the radio and TV throughout. He's continued to be a national leader in publishing books, articles, and really training other attorneys on how to think about these issues. So it's been my privilege to learn from him over the last several years. And he's been my mentor, also my boss, so I have to be careful about what I say. He's just been an extraordinary member of the legal community, and I think of the Bay Area community. Also point out that through all of this, he always found time to coach all of my Little League teams and my sister's softball and basketball teams. Some proof of that, in addition to being a top 10 national racer in 5Ks, proof of that is a picture from my 1990 Althouse Realty Little League team. Mike is in the top right of that photo. I am in the bottom left. So proof of our time here in Palo Alto. We go way back here, and Mike has been a member of the community, both as an attorney, but also as a coach. May have coached some of your kids, or may have coached against some of you who are on this call right now, or at least some of your kids. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Mark. When I started SALA, Senior Adults Legal Assistance, that happened in Palo Alto. And when I did it, it's very interesting. You look at what Avenidas is today, it's like one of the most impressive, comprehensive senior communities in the world. I mean, it's remarkable what it is. Okay, so in 1973, I went down to the Senior Center for Palo Alto to talk with somebody about starting free legal aid. And at that time, the Senior Center, it was a desk in the downtown library. Diana Steeples, some of you might know, was the only staff person working on this. So, how times have changed, huh? I mean, just remarkable. So it's a pleasure to continue to be serving and living in Palo Alto. So let us go forward here. Okay, let me introduce Mark. Mark also went to Stanford undergraduate. His degree was in management science and engineering. He worked at an internationally known and internationally prestigious management consulting firm, advised Fortune 500 companies, Department of Defense, had some tremendous and successful venture capital experience, and brought all of that to the firm that we continue to maintain and grow. He went to Loyola Law School in Southern California. Top of his class, he was the class speaker, which is always kind of a prestigious thing. That's sort of the choice of his classmates, kind of a nice thing. Since then, Mark has become kind of a star. He's won awards for writing at the national level. He's spoken at national conferences, just building that resume on a daily basis. It's kind of wonderful to watch. While he was doing all of that, for the fun of it, and for the fun of it, he also got into acting. Good-looking guy. He's in the Los Angeles area. I mean, how could you not? So he enjoyed some remarkable success, a lot of national commercials. He was on a number of television shows. He had the lead in a couple of independent films available on Netflix, I believe. So very cool. But
Prime
where
Video,
you saw
not
him,
Netflix.
not Netflix. Oh, where
It's available on Prime, yeah.
Okay, okay. So where you did see him was in the following picture. Okay, Mark was the actor to introduce Siri to the world. You know, we live with Siri every day now. And here's Mark running on the Embarcadero. This was the first time Siri spoke, and Mark introduced Siri on television ads all over the world. Every computer system saw him. So you saw him years and years ago. You didn't know it was him. His name wasn't there, but he's contributed to our education of the technological world in an acting, very cool way. Very, very
Yes.
fun.
I apologize for any Siri related issues you've had in trying to do voice to text. I've certainly had many issues. So now for those of you who've gotten to know us a little bit, I think it is important that you know where we're coming from and how we approach this. We are a multi-generational team. I come from a different background. I haven't just been a lawyer my whole life. Not that there's anything wrong with that, Dad. But I try to think holistically and put my management consulting hat on when I think about things. And Mike has been in this world for decades. So I try to bring a new perspective to it, but Mike has been kind of a guru who's trained other attorneys in this area. So on that note, we're going to go back into uncovering some of our mysteries and how we think about this. And as we look at long-term care planning, I mentioned this before, but there is no one-size-fits-all solution. I wish there was. I wish there was a do this and you will be good. Well, I guess you make tens of millions of dollars, you'll probably be okay then. But even then, you have tax issues that we have to help you with. Obviously, it's a challenging area. And one critical thing is you have to have a good legal and estate plan to lay the groundwork. You have to have a trust, a power of attorney, advance directive, these core documents in place, and they have to be up to date. We'll talk a little bit more about how those are a part of this as we go forward. And as we look at this, we are solution agnostic. We are not insurance salespeople, we're not financial advisors. We are attorneys, and we have a strong point of view on how you should look at this. But we are not here to push one solution over another. We're here to educate you about different ones and how they can fit together. And we can be that quarterback for you down the road if you ever have more questions about that. Mike and I co-authored a book called Facing the Reality of Long-Term Care. We're updating it now, but we have that available. We've written articles about this in national legal journals. Those are available on our website, gilfix.com. You can also follow me on Facebook, Mark Gilfix on Facebook for more information there. But we look at this holistically. We don't have a bias.
So, and as you think about this, you know, following up on what Mark said about being agnostic and listening to you, let's just make it really clear. We do not assume that everybody wants to save all their assets and use a Medi-Cal or some of the other government programs that are available. You know, the question is what's important to you, and most of us say the quote here: "No nursing home for me. I'm going to stay home. Period." Now that is my goal. That's what I want done. It's a matter of independence and dignity and being comfortable, quality of care and quality of life. You know, being in a familiar environment. And again, with the COVID-19 scare, it is more dangerous to be in a facility. I mean, it's sort of obvious. So that's reinforcing this feeling, I believe. And if you're going to stay at home, you know, no matter what, are you going to use all your assets no matter what, which is perfectly fine. Again, it's up to you. Or do you want to find ways to protect assets? Maybe look at government programs, do some multi-generational planning. So again, if that's your goal, we go down that path, and there are tools that are available that are just remarkable. You may also, or as a different goal, you might want to preserve your assets. It might be the most important thing for you might be preserving the family home for your kids and for those perfect grandkids, right? That's who the home is for. So that could take us in a different direction. If it's maximizing resources and government benefits to stay at home, but preserving the home, you know, we need to know that, and that can all be accommodated. It's a matter of what's important to you.
So let's go back to that first mystery that we talked about, Lena versus Helen. So again, just to recap, Lena and Helen both owned similar homes, similar level of equity. They've owned them for a while. They own them in this area. The value went up and up and up. Neither Helen or Lena really has much money in the bank. We have many clients in this situation. They have a house worth a couple $1 million. They might not have that much in the bank. So they're thinking, well, what can I do to use assets, to use the equity in my home to pay for my care? Because I don't have enough in the bank to pay for it. So Lena used some of her equity to pay for home care, to stay at home. because of the steps she took, remember her family lost over $600,000. Helen also used equity in her home because she took slightly different steps, got similar care, similar value of the home. Her family ended up getting everything. Everything stayed in the family. Both Helen and Lena got similar levels of care. So again, everything we talk about, we don't want you to sacrifice quality of care. This is just about taking intelligent steps to save assets where you can. Now, how can this be? What's the mystery? Well, that brings us to Tom Selleck. Now, why Tom Selleck? Well, Tom Selleck has become one of the ever-changing faces of reverse mortgages. This is an actual screenshot from one of his reverse mortgage ads. And Tom Selleck is a very handsome and sounds intelligent in these ads. And when you listen to these ads, you think there is no downside to doing a reverse mortgage. And we're not here to tell you that reverse mortgages are always bad. There are situations where they can make sense. But in this case, Lena's mistake was that she got a reverse mortgage when she had other options. So why can reverse mortgages be problematic, especially when it comes to planning for long-term care? The main issue goes to when they have to be paid back. So Lena took out money from the reverse mortgage, paid for care. Then her care needs increased. She had to move out of her house. When you move out of your house, a clock starts ticking if you have a reverse mortgage. Within 6 months or up to a year, this clock is going. And certainly after 12 months, no more than that, almost always, you have to pay back the reverse mortgage. The moment you move out of your house, this timer starts. So Lena moved out of the house. She needed more care. She had to go to a nursing home because her care needs increased. After a year, she obviously didn't have the money to pay back the loan, or she wouldn't have needed the loan in the first place. So what happens? Well, you have to sell the house. You sell the house while Lena's alive, capital gains taxes. She's owned the house forever. So it's gone way up in value. When she sells it, there is no step up in capital gains taxes. I'll talk briefly about what that is, but there's a massive capital gains tax bill. So she sells it, you pay the tax, but hey, you have some money left. That's great. But all of a sudden she has some money in the bank. As we'll talk about later, she is not eligible for Medi-Cal. Her house was exempt. You can own a house and still get Medi-Cal. If you sell your house and it's cash, you cannot get Medi-Cal if you have too much cash in the bank. So she then had to burn through another $300,000 paying for nursing home care. She lost over $600,000 when she went from living at home to a nursing home because she had a reverse mortgage. It had to get paid back after she moved out. Helen, on the other hand, took a different approach. She talked to us, and she had some family members. She had a son and a daughter who both had decent jobs. And instead of getting a reverse mortgage, they said, you know what, Mom, we'll help you take some equity out, but let's do it in a traditional loan where we're going to co-sign with you. Because that's the only way she'd get the loan. But by co-signing, the loan is not due the moment that Helen moved out. So when she moved out, remember that year clock that started ticking when Lena moved out, when the loan became due. Helen didn't face this deadline. So that family got to hold on to the house. They kept paying the loan, but they were able to pay for home care for a while with the same equity they took out. Helen also had to go to a nursing home, unfortunately, after a couple of years. But when she went to the nursing home, all she owned was her house. She was instantly eligible for Medi-Cal. The house stayed in her house. The house stayed in her estate when she passed away. There was a step up in cost basis. The family did not lose the $300,000 in capital gains taxes. So overall, $600,000 was saved for Helen's family versus Lena's, just because they looked at home equity a little bit differently. I want to talk about long-term care insurance, Mike.
Oh, sure. Okay, so let's go back to George and Alan, right? And we have roughly comparable situations in the sense that each paid for long-term care insurance for a number of years, and neither of them ended up needing long-term care, right? So with George, didn't need long-term care, didn't cash in the benefits. When he passed away, the policy just evaporated because it was a long-term care insurance policy. Family got nothing. Alan, roughly the same thing, paid premiums for the same number of years, also didn't need nursing home care, didn't cash in the policy and use it for that purpose. But Alan's family got $180,000. I mean, that's a dramatic difference. So different scenarios, different outcomes. So what we have here is a situation where George had pure long-term care insurance, which means if you need it for that purpose, you have it, but then it evaporates. With Alan, he had what is called a hybrid policy. If he didn't need the policy for long-term care insurance payments, it was available as a death benefit. So he kind of hedged his bets. and it ended up being a $180,000 death benefit for his family. So again, same approach using long-term care insurance. They chose different policy types. And again, this is not to say that a hybrid policy is always ideal. You know, everything has its pros and cons. One might cost more, one might cost less. But the point is, again, to understand all of the options and just make sure that you choose the policy or the approach that's right for you.
Exactly. And one thing about long-term care insurance, there's different solutions, but the longer you wait, the less likely you can get it. We have some clients who come to see us and they'll say, well, I might have to go to an assisted living facility like next year. Can I still buy insurance? And the reality is, if you have pre-existing conditions, this is an area where you have to take a physical. And if you have issues already, it's probably too late. So you want to ideally get this a bit ahead of time. Or if you see your parents dealing with this, we see a lot of adult children who will look into it because they see what mom and dad are going through, and they just want the certainty of knowing that this policy is there. So let's go back to the tale of two life insurance policies, Paul versus Greg. Paul has a policy with a $500,000 death benefit, and there's a $60,000 cash value. Cash value is what you can basically turn it into the life insurance company for. When you give up the death benefit, they'll say, okay, we'll give you $60,000 if you just give up this policy. It means they don't have to pay $500,000 later. Greg has a slightly smaller policy, a $380,000 death benefit and a $40,000 cash value. Both of them decide, or they just through an oversight or because they decide to stop paying premiums. They just don't want to deal with premiums anymore. Actually, it's not an oversight. They both consciously decide to stop paying premiums. Paul stops paying and everything is lost. He gets nothing out of this policy. It just goes to zero. Greg, on the other hand, because of the decision he makes, his policy ends up paying for his health care and his long-term care at home. He had the smaller policy. He stopped paying. Both of them stopped paying. Why is it that Greg got a bunch of help and Paul got nothing? You need to reframe how you think about life insurance. That's key to this. Life insurance is an asset. It is not just an insurance policy. It is an asset. Now, the key is it typically has to be a whole life policy for it to be an asset. If you have a term policy, one that expires after a couple of years, probably won't work for this. But if you have a whole policy, if you've had one for many years, you may have an incredible opportunity. So what happened with Paul, when he stopped paying, he just let his policy lapse. He basically just said, hey, insurance company, I'm not going to pay anymore. They said, thank you very much. We owe you nothing. You didn't do anything. Greg, on the other hand, worked with us. We connected him with an expert who did a life settlement. And so basically, what does that mean? Greg, you're allowed to do this, sold his policy on the open market. There are marketplaces where you can sell insurance policies. And he could have just turned it in to get that $48,000 from the insurance company. But smart third-party investors look at these policies and they say, okay, well, Greg is, he's 60 years old. He's probably going to live another 20 years or whatever age he is. They look at life expectancy, they look at tables and they say, wait, we can get a good return on this even if we pay him way more than the insurance company would get. Because we're getting the rights to the death benefit when Greg passes away. His family won't get any more, we will. But we're going to take on payments for this policy. We'll buy this from you, Greg. We'll give you more than the insurance company will give you. We get the right to the death benefit, but that was money. So Greg got $112,000 for his policy. He was able to use that to pay for home care by selling the rights to his policy. So bottom line is, it is always a mistake to surrender your policy, to just let it go. You may not have an opportunity as great as Greg's, but there's a very real possibility that you could in selling your policy or replacing it with a better one. So talk to us if you have an old life insurance policy. There can be incredible opportunities to use those to pay for your care.
And that doesn't matter, by the way, if giving us a copy, if you'd like to pursue this, of the last annual statement, it'll reveal the death benefit and it will reveal the cash value. And then you can just see if and this is like a cost-free effort, by the way. There's no fees you're paying to make this kind of exchange. You come out ahead.
No, that's right. I want to talk about Lois and William.
Okay, so back to Medi-Cal, and remember we had Lois and William. She had about $100,000, had to spend it all. William had about $4 million, didn't have to spend much of anything. They both needed nursing home care. Medi-Cal stepped in. So the mystery here, the solution, so to speak, is to look at the Medi-Cal program. Okay, let's go to the next one, please. All right. So Lois got no advice. She was told to spend down, a term we abhor. We hate that term because it means by definition, you didn't get any advice. You don't have to spend everything and get down to $2,000, the point of eligibility, to become eligible for the Medi-Cal program. You don't. Okay, William is the case in point. $4 million estate. He got advice from our office, learned about the planning, about the protections that are built into the system and some of the planning options. So he ended up preserving virtually everything in his estate, qualified for Medi-Cal to pay the nursing home bill. And the only thing he had to pay was the income that he automatically received from a pension and Social Security. Okay. So again, dramatically different outcomes when you look at sources of payment, if somebody's facing the cost of long-term care or even home care for that matter. Okay. So with Medi-Cal, the residence is exempt. The residence doesn't count. So the goal is very often, again, to save assets, protect assets for the kids, for the family. Think of it that way, especially the family home. That's sort of a value that's in our culture, in our society, and the law reinforces that objective. If you have a special needs child or a special needs grandchild, it's all the more important. I mean, it is all the more important that assets be protected for the benefit of that child. So our ears perk up. There's a lot of extraordinary planning opportunities to employ if you have a special needs child. They're just astonishing. So let's take a second now and look at Medi-Cal and the fundamental eligibility guidelines. Some of this will surprise you. All right. So for an individual to qualify for Medi-Cal, the assumption here is in a nursing home, in the extreme situation, can't have more than $2,000 in countable assets. Some assets don't count. Okay. Like the residence, exempt. Retirement accounts, you have a couple $1 million in retirement accounts. And actually, we go back to the gentleman who had a $4 million estate. His home was worth a little under $3 million, exempt, didn't count. He had almost $1 million in retirement accounts. And because he was taking out the required minimum distributions, in California, the money in the IRA, that didn't count either. He had a few $100,000 beyond that, and he was able to make transfers in a very carefully structured way to protect that money. We'll get to that in just a moment. Okay. So for a couple, there's a special rule. If one spouse goes into the nursing home, again, that person can't have more than $2,000 in her name if she's going to qualify for Medi-Cal while in a nursing home. But the spouse at home has protections. The spouse at home does not have to become bankrupt. Okay. So the minimum protections are the following. The spouse at home, at the time that the one in the nursing home qualifies by having no more than $2,000, can have a little under $130,000 in cash sitting in a bank account. And that's okay. That's allowed. There's also income protections for the spouse living at home. If the combined income is about $3,000 for the couple combined, the spouse living at home keeps every penny because it's under the guaranteed minimum of about $3,200. So again, asset protection, income protections. And each of these are minimums. It is possible to go to court or what's called a fair hearing and increase that level of protection, which we've been successful with in many situations, letting the spouse at home keep not $128,000, but $200,000, $250,000. The rules are remarkable. Now, what about gifting? What about gifting? Can I just give it away and get Medi-Cal the next day? Let me just give you the simplest illustration. Okay, Aunt Georgia is going into a nursing home. She has $100,000 to her name, and she writes a check to her niece, and she divests herself of all of that money to get down to $2,000. Okay, so in doing that, she incurs a penalty. When she applies for Medi-Cal, they ask her, they say, did you make any gifts within the prior 30 months? And her answer has to be yes. I gave away $100,000. That would make her ineligible for Medi-Cal for about 13 months. So she has no money. She doesn't, because she gave it away. She doesn't qualify for Medi-Cal. She's in trouble. Okay, now let's say that Aunt Georgia got some advice and did something different. Instead of writing a check for $100,000, she writes 10 checks within the same month, each for $10,000. She just gave away $100,000. Now, what's the impact on Medi-Cal eligibility? I mean, this is remarkable, okay? Rather than 13 months, the period of Medi-Cal ineligibility goes from 13 months down to 1 month. That's the law in California. Now, don't do this at home. I mean, if gifting is going to be done, there's a host of issues, a ton of tax issues that you have to keep in mind and give attention to. There's gift tax, there could be property tax issues, on and on. But again, gifting can take place. We do look back 30 months in California. They ask for any gifts made in the prior 30 months. If you know the law and you structure it properly, it's amazing how much can be given away, but you have to be smart about it. Get advice.
Hence, don't spend down. There are almost always better ways to do it. And the rules make no sense. So don't try to logically make sense of this. They are nonsensical, but they've been that way for a while. So we'll go back to our slides. And I think the key thing is most people these days, polls show that 90% of older Americans want to stay in the home. I think the coronavirus crisis has maybe even heightened that. So we've seen what's gone on in care homes, which is ridiculous that they've been so unsafe. But the key is you have to plan comprehensively. Does your family really know what you want, by the way? And this is not really the subject of our talk. And we give 2-hour talks just on Medi-Cal planning, by the way. So we're just scratching the surface. But one thing that we recommend that you can do right away, talk to your family about this. I mean, talk to them, just have the conversation. It can be tricky, but we always think it's better to frame it around your hopes and your dreams rather than just fears and around sickness and death. Talk about, okay, what do you want? You know, where do you want to be? Is there a care home or a community that you'd feel happy moving to if you need a little help? Or do you want to stay home no matter what? Does your family really understand that? Does your doctor really understand that? Is that communicated in your documents? Or are you just in the frame of mind of, you know what, I'm just going to spend everything. I don't care about saving assets. I'm just going to enjoy it as much as I can.
And let me speak from the elder generation perspective here. Okay. We all say this, you know, I want to be at home. And it's almost to the point where it's expected and it can be tossed off by the next generation. Oh, of course you do. But they're thinking to themselves, but the kids are thinking to themselves, but you know, but we know that she may not accept it or he may not accept it, but the time may come when we just have to do it. You know, tut, tut. No, I mean, here is where we have to be strong. We say, hey, I want you to really get it. And that's why we have the word really bold and in italics, like really get it. That, you know, this is not about an inheritance. This is vitally important to my values. And by God, I expect you to carry this out. And you do have to make sure the doctor understands that as well, because there could be some care risks being at home. Many of us would accept those risks, right? I mean, everything's a risk. So be definite if this is your feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what can happen? You know, I mean, stuff happens. A healthcare crisis comes up and the doctor says you need to go into a facility. The family members, the individuals named in the advance directives, you know, they're just trying to watch out for your well-being. They mean well. And the next thing you know, you're in a nursing home, you're in assisted living, you're gone from your home. It happens all the time. I wouldn't say routinely, but it happens all the time. We've seen it 1,000 times. Cost of care is not irrelevant. You know, you might have a mixed agenda. You want to stay at home, but you really want to save the house for the kids. That goes back to that example we gave, where being smart about using home equity makes all the difference in the world. Ways in which you can plan, protect the house, and those in which the house can be lost. And the fact is, bottom line, a lot of the kids desire, they want the inheritance. In fact, frankly, a lot of kids really need it. Trying to live in the Bay Area, if you don't have a pile of money sitting in a bank account, it's tough. So, you know, it's human. These are human circumstances where, again, as elders, everybody, you need to take charge and be absolutely clear about what you want done. Okay?
Absolutely.
So steps you can take. Let me just go through.
How do you stay at home?
Yeah. Okay, so long-term care insurance, you should look into it. It may be too late in terms of cost or physical or mental condition. Using your assets wisely. There's nothing wrong with using your money and using it up. I mean, it's primarily about us. Quality of life, quality of care. Home equity, there are smart ways of doing it, and sometimes a reverse mortgage is okay. You know, we're not saying they're always bad, but it is misleading, what you often see. If you want to stay at home, all of your documents need to say it. Your advance directive, needs to say it. Your trust and your power of attorney need to say it, because here's your advance directive saying, I want to stay home, but all the money is being managed in the trust. And particularly if there's different people named, you have to make sure you have consistency and reinforcing language and reinforcing documents. So again, it's a comprehensive plan that has to be put together.
Yeah, and I would just add to this, your financial plan needs to be incorporated with this. We work with some financial advisors directly. We're actually working on building a network of financial advisors who we know get this, who we're working with so they understand how this all fits together. But your financial plan needs to be a part of this as well. How you think about your savings, your investments, the income your investments will produce, equity versus fixed income mix. All of that needs to be part of this equation as we look at the different costs of long-term care. And needless to say, we've had some turbulence in the market recently. So it kind of, I think, really brings home how scary it can be at times. If you have a good plan and it's integrated, the legal, the financial, the insurance plan, you can rest a lot more easily.
You know, I have to reinforce that. I'm sorry, Mark, but you know, I'm partially guilty. You know, I don't think about money management, and when things go south, I say, what do I do? You know, I just have no idea. And finding somebody who doesn't just say, I'm a financial planner, but I'm a financial planner and I understand the cost of long-term care. And I understand the tools available to help you integrate asset protection, building your portfolio, but again, in a way that's designed to respond to and have the assets available in a smart way to pay for the cost of long-term care. It can make the difference between staying at home or not. So, you know, we just can't overemphasize that.
Yeah, and as we say, we've talked about this before, but solutions exist in virtually every situation, but there's no one size fits all approach. And that's the challenge, but also it makes this area of planning so rewarding for us. And really critical whenever possible, we want to coordinate across generations. Mike and I have written multiple articles about this. We've spoken at national legal conferences, and we believe that the presumptive approach for estate planning and long-term care planning should be multi-generational. It doesn't work in every family. We know there can be conflicts and tricky situations, but when everyone's on the same page, when everyone's communicating, and we can bring them into the planning process to whatever extent mom and dad are okay with, it is extraordinary what we can accomplish. We've helped thousands of families. We've saved millions and millions and millions of dollars for families. And again, we want to think about this holistically, and that's what we encourage you to do. We're throwing a lot at you here, but the key is to understand that different solutions exist. But you want to think holistically. How is my insurance portion of this with my financial plan? How can my legal plan properly ensure that the right decisions are made when I need help and that my assets are protected? We want to circle back to the legal planning side of this, and this is what we do day in, day out for families. It's creating those estate planning documents and really that coordinated plan from the legal perspective. So what are the key documents that you need? Well, there's 3 core documents that everybody needs to have, and everybody really needs to have up to date. That's a revocable living trust, a durable power of attorney for finances, and advanced healthcare directive. The trust determines where your assets are going after you're gone. It ensures you're not exposed to probate. It ensures you have a backup trustee who can help you even while you're alive if you need assistance. There are different structures of trust. If you did your trust several years ago, there may be massive tax benefits to redoing it, restructuring it. Again, not the subject of this talk, but it's a good idea to revisit your trust every 3 to 5 years. Certainly if something changes more often than that. If your backup trustee is no longer the right choice, you got to update it. Do you have language in your trust that talks about your goal to stay at home if that's what you want? That really should be there. So if a third party takes over managing your affairs, they know this, and it's in the language of the trust that it's okay for them to spend your money to keep you at home if you're not the one in charge of your finances. Durable power of attorney document. This goes to day-to-day finances. If you're incapacitated, who can step in, deal with your utilities, your government benefits, and any number of business of life issues that we need to have handled. And very critically, the durable power of attorney document is often the most critical when it comes to asset protection, because if you don't have capacity anymore, the person named in the power of attorney is the one who's in charge of taking steps on your behalf to protect the house, to protect the rental property, to protect your savings. Does your power of attorney document address this? Does it have clear language that says it's okay I want to stay at home, do whatever it takes to keep me at home? Do you have Medi-Cal asset protection provisions? So Mike talked about how you can do gifting and how that was one of many strategies we can use, that if you do need nursing home care and it's unavoidable, Can the person named in your power of attorney, if you can't make decisions anymore, have you empowered them to take steps to protect your asset? Even if you don't want to do anything now, if you need it in the future, is someone empowered to do that? So critical to have an up-to-date power of attorney document that addresses this. Your advanced healthcare directive goes to medical decision-making. My mother, Myra Gerson-Gilfix, gave a talk with Mike just last week for Avenidas. We also gave a talk to the Stanford Alumni Association about medical decision-making and patient advocacy. Critical that you have an up-to-date advanced directive, so someone's empowered to help you if you go to the hospital. Talk briefly about family protection trusts, a way that you can leave assets to your kids in a very protected way. So bottom line, there's 3 core documents, and really a 4th if you have kids and you want to protect assets for them, that we think you should have, and they should be up to date. If you haven't looked at them in the last 2 to 3 years, it is time to take a fresh look. And we can, of course, help with that. Mike, do you want to talk about family protection trusts just really briefly?
Yeah, just briefly. When you leave assets to your kids, you have 2 choices. You leave assets directly to them, or you leave money in one of these trusts. By the way, these are generically called dynasty trusts. They've been around for a long time. We do them for the vast majority of our clients. Bottom line, if you leave assets to a child in one of these trusts and he or she later endures a divorce, all the money that you left that child is protected. It's going to stay with your child. You never liked that son-in-law anyway, and here you go. You're doing you're doing a prenup or a post-up for your child. If your child is sued, if they inherit the money directly, it's in their names, the money can be reached. If it's in this trust, we've got litigation protection. And anybody can, look, you see lawyers everywhere. So lawsuits can happen. So getting that kind of protection is tremendous. Now, the biggest benefit, if you look at the literature, has to do with avoiding estate tax. So let's say you leave $2 or $3 million to your daughter, and she's smart and she's lucky. By the time she passes away, decades down the road, it's grown to $15 or $20 million. If the assets go into this trust, the entire $15 or $20 million passes intact to your grandkids. It's not included in your daughter's estate. I mean, that can save millions of dollars. And now we're talking, by the way, about protecting money for the benefit, we said it before, of those perfect grandkids. So this is multi-generational planning. The same protections remain intact for the grandkids. They inherit all of this money, all of these protections, and the money is all there intact for the benefit of great-grandkids. If you trust your kids' abilities, by the way, they can be the trustees of their own trusts. This is like, having your cake and eating it too. They are tremendously protected. So they're usually part of an integrated plan. You need to know about them and either do them or have a good reason not to.
Yeah, if you have a house in this area, it puts you in a category where it's absolutely justified. You don't have to be a multimillionaire for these to make a lot of sense. I think we think they should be available to everybody.
So again, I don't want to be too redundant, but there is a need to take a fresh look at things. I mean, the law changes constantly. If you did your planning many, many years ago, even if you did it with us, I mean, things have changed. So you need to review. You need to be up to date. Depending on your goals, staying at home, maybe avoiding estate tax, whatever they may be, it needs to be an integrated plan, ideally multi-generational, and creating a comprehensive long-term care strategy. Accept the reality that 70% of us are going to need some form of long-term care. How are we going to pay for it? How involved are our kids and the next generation going to be in the planning? Hopefully, they'll be involved to a great extent and in a very supportive way. We're counting on it. You hear that, Mark?
Okay. Yes, loud and clear, loud and clear. He knows that I'm very well educated. I have no excuses. I am about as educated as one can be in this area. And that's where we work with. We love to work with families just to think about this. A lot of times people come to us and there's no real necessary concrete steps we have to take other than making sure their plan is up to date. But we want to plant the seeds and start that conversation. And of course, we're not the only shop in town. There are other attorneys who do this, but whoever you work with, just make sure that they really understand how long-term care, asset protection fits in your estate plan. You don't want to work with someone who does business, corporate law, but also does estate planning on the side. They might be wonderful, but they probably don't think about this. So make sure that this is addressed when you think about your legal planning. And we're almost done here, but one thing that you have right now is the gift of attention. You're paying attention to this right now. It's top of mind. And we know that the moment you leave this webinar, 15 things will flood into your consciousness. You'll start thinking again about the crisis. You'll think about the groceries you got to get and how you can stay safe in the grocery store, all that stuff. Overcome the danger of denial right now. A lot of people keep putting this off. They think, well, I'm going to be in that 30%. I won't need it. I'm going to live forever. I did my documents years ago. I'm good. I checked that box in 2004. A client this morning, they did their plan in 2004. Now they realize just how much they have to change. We, of course, are available to help, and we want to offer everybody who's on this webinar a no-cost way to chat with us. We can take a look at your documents, but we're offering office hours. So if you want to set a 15-minute call with Mike or I or one of our other attorneys, no cost to do that. If you want to do a planning appointment and really dive in, we can also offer that. But we want to give you contact information so you can call our office. You can call them now. They'll get back to you, 650-493-8070. You can email Ashley at our front desk team, ashley.deck@gilfix.com, and I'll leave this up for just a moment so you can write it down. You can also just call our office at any time. Our website's just gilfix.com. You contact our office the next few days. We'd encourage you to do it sooner. We will offer a complimentary 15-minute chat just to go over some of the questions we might not have been able to get to here, or something more specific to your situation. So we want to offer that. No strings attached, no expectation that you'll work with us after it. We'd love to just get the chance to chat with you. And we love connecting with the Palo Alto and the Avenidas community. So we're going to go through just a couple questions that we had come in. Let me just see what we have.
I have one here. One question is, somebody knows about the $15,000 annual exclusion, the amount that you can give away each year and not report it to the IRS. That has nothing whatsoever to do with Medi-Cal. A $15,000 gift will make you ineligible for Medi-Cal for 1 month. So it's not a freebie, that's a tax thing. Okay, go on.
Yeah, and so there was a question just about the cost of care. You said a couple spent $500,000 on supplemental care at the V. They thought that most care was covered. So that's actually a great question. Mike, why don't you address that? You work directly with those.
Yeah, the situation was that they were told they both needed to go into the highest level of care, the nursing home care, and they adamantly opposed that. They wanted to stay, their version of at home, which was in their independent living apartment. And the only way the facility would allow that is if they had 24-hour care. We actually worked out a deal so they could stay in their own apartment. It's an extraordinary situation, but no, being at the V doesn't mean absolutely everything is covered. You might have to pay for supplemental care. It happens routinely at the V and at all, they're called life care communities. So yeah, that can sneak up on you.
Yeah, we have another question about what happens to my house if I have to move out. Is it exempt if I'm renting it out, or what if my family wants to rent my house out after I move out? So the house can still be exempt, but if you let's say you have to go to a nursing home and your house is exempt for purposes of Medi-Cal eligibility, you can get Medi-Cal to pay for the cost of care. But if the house is rented out, that income could be lost to the nursing home. So there are special trusts that we can create to protect the house from that. We transfer title into an irrevocable trust, a special type of design trust where we capture maximum tax benefits to your family. So it goes to the kids with a stepped up cost basis, no capital gains taxes, but rental income does not get lost to a nursing home in that case. So that's another piece of the plan that we can add.
Yeah, and by the way, that does an excellent job of illustrating how complicated the planning is. I mean, you can do something simplistic like rent it out. You can do that. But again, you're going to lose all that income. So there's 2 or 3 buried tax issues there that we address. I mean, when we do this long-term care planning, it isn't just Medi-Cal by any stretch of the imagination. There's other programs with different criteria. There's a program called PACE, aid and attendance for veterans. There's a myriad programs out there that we know about. So again, tax, what are the other programs available? What are the community resources? What's available from Avenidas? Comprehensive thinking. Yeah,
so we are now at the end of the time. So we thank you so much for being here. Please take action. Talk to your family about this. If you'd like to chat with us, we're more than happy to do that. Or talk to anybody, talk to people about this. Communicate with your family about your goals. Talk to your financial advisor. Try to think about how you can integrate your legal planning. We thank you so much for being here. We will post this to our YouTube channel. We'll email out a link as soon as this is posted. We did get a question about sharing slides. We don't typically share slides because they can be taken out of context without voiceover. The webinar itself will be available. I recommend playing it back at 1.5 times speed. You can do that on YouTube to get through this really quickly. you can do that. I love that for webinars. So we will share this. But again, thank you so much for being here. We know these are crazy times, but it's a privilege that you spent some time with us. And we hope this got your mind going and you start thinking about this, because there is so much power when we plan ahead and when we communicate about this. So on that note, again, we thank you for attending and we hope you got something out of it. Take care.